I don't see slides. Okay. Welcome everybody. Chris, we got some slides or no?
I'm coming. Just got to switch over to presenter. Right. Go ahead.
All right. Welcome to our December. Oh, we already have a question. December 9th, 2021, our holiday edition, ATC part 2. Two special guests. One you've already seen when I wasn't here, so I apologize for that. And the second one is a very special guest. Slides are coming. But there they are.
There we go.
Ask ATC part 2. So today we are generously brought to you by our triumvirate of sponsorships, all from Boeing, of course, ForeFlight, Boeing company, and Jepson, a Boeing company. And I did say Jepson. And so thank you to them for helping us get this broadcast off the ground. No pun intended, literally. A couple things, as always, on the right side of everyone's screen. We point this out because this is how you ask questions. You do not do nice outfit. Thank you, Kurt. You win a travel mug. Steven, before we even introduce, let's give Kurt a travel mug. We will have prizes throughout, so it behooves you to be nice to me today. Okay. So yes, on the right side is how you're going to ask questions. There's a questions tab. Just fill it out. You do not ask them verbally as you ask them, though. In the text here, I will bring them up if they pertain to the topic at hand. So anyway, next is let's introduce ourselves. So
I'm clicking. Here it goes. All right, go Pablo.
So I am Pablo Morelia, Senior Director of Flight Training Technology, bringing everything to you from AOPA, You Can Fly Academy for technology. More importantly, the app that I constantly talk about that we will see eventually, but like Steven, will be on your tiptoes and your tip of your tongue forever. APTA does everything you want within the cockpit for the CFI. That jacket, sorry, Jerry, you're not winning anything yet. You want that tie? Thank you, Paul. I like you, but not yet. Okay, Chris, introduce yourself, please.
I am Chris Moser, and I work at AOPA on the same team as Pablo. And after that introduction, anyway, I work on the same stuff. We build resources for CFIs and flight schools, and so of course we're excited to be here. I am a CFI, and I am going to send it back to Pablo. Well, actually, let's go ahead and send it to Steven. Pablo, want to do the intro to Steven?
All right, so lastly, the man behind the scenes spinning the tables, the wheels of steel. Steven, say hello, Steven.
All right.
Oh, there he is.
So hello, everybody. Great.
There he is.
Happy to be here.
Waiting to see forever.
All right.
Good to see you, Steven. And remember, Kurt Ayers, please send your information or however you want to work at Steven. Maybe you want to talk to him privately on the chat. He wins a travel mug. Can you show it to us? Oh, we're going to have fun today, people, so don't ask if we can keep this thing moving. We will. All right, so Kurt gets the first one. All right, so let's do some introductions. Damien, there's the mug. Kurt, your new mug coming at you. All right, Damien, you want to give a slight intro since you've been here before? Let's see what you got.
Sure. Welcome, everybody. Damien Gutberlet, Bfr Corridors subject matter expert for Digital iBiz LLC. And I currently work for as a contractor for the FAA as part of the Remote Tower Pilot Program. And I look forward to providing as much input as I can.
Thank you, Damon. Rebecca, not last, but because you're the new one, you're going to get a little more time to introduce yourself and tell us why you're so awesome.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm glad everybody's here. My name is Rebecca Collins. I'm an air traffic control system analyst. I work now for Fort Hill Group in Washington, D.C. on the remote tower project primarily. My past was with the FAA, of course, for 23 years. I had a couple of Class Delta towers, a couple of Class Bravo towers, O'Hare in LA, and a Class Bravo Tracon and a Tersa. So that's my experience in the background, and I'm really happy to be here and participate. Thank you.
Ooh, a Tersa. Fantastic. Not many of those around, so that's awesome. Yeah, that's great.
Hey, and you guys will like it. It was Rockford.
I love Rockford. I took care of all my landings one night there on that 10,000 footer.
One pass.
That's right. It was awesome. All right. Next slide, please.
All right. Oh, there it goes. Oh, here we go. This is
As
like
always.
a Christmas present every episode.
It's thank you, Nachiket, for that positive statement. However, wings, our favorite past, but yet favorite fun thing to hand out, right? So this is wings credit for this webinar. Only if you are live, please come back and watch us on repeat. However, only live will get you credit. It is with the original email that you signed up with or registered that you will get that. Now, you can see us also under playlists in the AOPA Live. We are under the AOPA Live YouTube channel, so you can watch us there in playlists. And so please give this about solid 24 hours before you go there. The recording will not be there beforehand. You can also go to webinars.aopa.org and you can find us there. And actually at the GoToWebinar channel as well, but you know, who goes there? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And here we go, Chris. Kick us off.
Let's do this. What is ahead today? Well, we know it's Ask ATC Part Deux, and which means there were so many questions the last time we did this. So we took some of the questions that we weren't able to get to. We got some new questions, and we know that you're probably going to have a ton. So let's get into this. Here are the topics that we kind of saw with the big questions today: airport ops, Class Bravo and Charlie operations, and how we deal with that. Flight following. So many questions about flight following. We literally could probably do an episode just on that. We do want to spend a little time on IFR operations and things like that. And finally, just general radio communication procedures. So let's just jump into it. The first thing that I wanted to throw out there was that I know, Damien, you brought this last time and there were still some people that were unclear about it. They specifically said, so can you explain one more time? Because I know that this was one that I had my personal question too. What's this deal? What's the deal with when we're told like a 3-mile base or told to make these kind of base directions? What do you guys mean by that?
Okay, so when ATC instructs to report a 3-mile left or right base, if you're looking at the picture, for us it would be a right. So basically what it means is we want you to report 3 miles from the airport, basically a half a mile of the approach end. So we don't want you to extend the wind beyond your normal base. So a normal pattern, Chris, if correct me if I'm wrong, is approximately about a half a mile off the approach end when you turn base, right? So we are looking, so basically what you would want to do is that point between the downwind and when you start turning base, basically just take a line and go directly out, don't extend the downwind, go out from the airport 3 miles, and then that's where we want you to report.
Good. So in other words, if you're coming in, you're not doing anything where you're like, here's this 3-mile line on final. You're not coming in up here. You're going to bring it in just like a normal half-mile distance from the runway, but 3 miles out. So that's pretty straightforward. So that's good to know. And of course, I know one thing that we talked about too is with controllers is sometimes that we do our best. Like we try to gauge that our best. Sometimes we might end up coming in on an angle because we're trying to gauge it and see the runway, but that's what ATC is asking for. So I think that's hopefully pretty clear. I love the fact you guys updated the graphic and put more info on it. So I'm hoping that's helpful.
Hey, it's
awesome.
helpful to me. That's the question I had actually.
Yeah, see, it's a good one. Here's another one too that we had a question from somebody. It says this kind of goes along with the same thing. This one has to do with the final. So we're being told to report a 4-mile final, and then before we reach that reporting point, say we're 5 miles out, tower, maybe they see us or whatever, and they say, you know, November 1, 2, 3, whatever, you're cleared number 1 for cleared to land runway 25. Do you still need to report the 4-mile final once you've been cleared to land?
For me, yes, and in most controllers, yes, still report the 4-mile final, because in many cases, what the reporting issue is that we don't have a radar a lot of times. And so that gives us a better indication of where you are on final for that.
And a real quick, David,
do you have anything to add with that?
Someone asked because you did say this was a right base. This is actually
that was that was a quick error. That's a left base.
Okay.
Yeah.
Left base.
Someone asked, someone brought it up. The other reason. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, for me it's right, on the right. So for you it's a left. It's a left.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I would just add to what Damien said there, as far as the distance from the airport and whether or not to say it again. Just because the controller clears you to land doesn't mean he sees you. So if he says in sight cleared to land, well, then there's probably not necessary to again say I'm at 4 miles. But if he doesn't tell you you're in sight, or he's in sight, or the airplane is in sight, then he still needs that report for sure. And I just wouldn't drop the report unless I was told.
And my guess would be that in this particular instance or whatever, that they're that far out, they're probably not busy at all, which is maybe why you got cleared to land, but still that doesn't mean they see you, and it's good to let them know. So that makes sense. This is rare, by the way. I've not had this happen very often.
Can you quickly define square the base? Someone asked.
Yes. In fact, that's our next question too. It's amazing how they're right on top of it. Look at that.
Amazing.
It's like,
Thank you, Michael.
What does it mean when they square the base? Exactly. They said, and this person even said, does that mean a 90-degree angle to the leg, not a Talladega oval? Which is why I wanted to say this question. What does that mean? Yeah.
Yes. So when we give an instruction to square the base, square your turn to final, square the base to final. What we want, we do not want a Talladega turn, I guess is what you would call it. We want a harder turn. And what that does is that provides us more time and more space. That's the reason for it. So if you're looking at the diagram for the base that we used, you can kind of see a nice gentle turn to final there. We would want it a harder turn to final. So you would want to stay on the base a little bit longer before making that turn to final. Rebecca, do you have anything?
Well, real quick, I think you mentioned this, but the 3 mile final is measured to what? The numbers, the end of the runway, the tower, the center of the field, GPS.
The runway threshold.
Okay, there you go. Thank you. Again,
right there,
I'm just
the end of the
asking
runway
as we
for
go.
our approach end.
Yep. Cool.
So there was one other one somebody asked too. It's like, if you don't have GPS, glass, whatever, I assume they mean GPS, how do you determine the mileage for base? I know that you guys have like landmarks and things that you pick. I'll just give my perspective as a pilot or instructor, is that we just estimate. Like, I use the GPS sometimes, but I'll estimate, and I actually add a half mile onto the GPS because I know that the GPS measures to the middle of the airport. So what are you guys looking for? Is that okay, that general estimate? Does it have to be precisely 3 miles, or is it just close good enough?
Rebecca, you like to take this one?
Sure. Unless you're a certain type of aircraft, we wouldn't expect you to be exact at all. So we know it's an estimate. Yeah.
Cool. That's it. Now, here is the last question for airport ops. This one came in it's hot off the presses. It came in this morning, I believe. And so this person was actually, they're flying out of Montgomery Field in California, but it's a great question overall. If you go to one, the case here that they have at Montgomery Field is they have 2 parallel runways, and then they've got an often not used cross intersecting runway. And so I think that overall for people, if you fly to an airport that has an intersecting runway, the question was, they said the tower told them to land and then to turn onto the inactive runway and contact ground. And they wanted to know, while I'm trying to contact ground, do I just sit on the inactive runway, or do I continue and taxi off? The follow-up question was, what if you're not told to turn onto an inactive runway? You're just trying to get off the runway as soon as possible. So I'm not sure, either Damien or Rebecca, when do you guys want to hit that one? I know we talked about this one beforehand.
Sure. So I'll start, and Rebecca, let me know if you've got anything else, or you want to, or I missed something. For the first part, when you are instructed to turn off onto an inactive runway and told to contact ground, the expectation is that you're going to continue to the first available taxiway, and then an exit at that first available taxiway, unless you are given a different instruction. If you're given a different instruction to taxi down to a further down taxiway or something along that line, then you do as instructed as ATC. But if there is no instruction, turn off. If tower does not tell you, hey, turn off at taxiway Bravo or whatever the taxiway may be, go to the first available taxiway and exit the runway. For the second part of, if you're not instructed to turn off onto a inactive runway, can you? No, you cannot. A pilot cannot enter an inactive runway to exit another runway without ATC authorization. So if you are landing and you are at an intersecting runway and you get to that intersection and tower has not told you to make that turn, you are to continue through that intersection to the next available taxiway and then exit accordingly as instructed in the AIM. Rebecca, do you have anything to add to that?
That was the perfect answer. I just reiterate, don't turn onto any runway, whether you think it's active or inactive, without a clearance from air traffic. That's it.
There you go. Avoid runways altogether unless you're specifically told otherwise. Taxiways, fair game, I guess, unless you're instructed otherwise. All right, cool.
And don't do a 180 back to a taxiway either.
Yeah, keep it moving, right?
Keep it moving.
Keep it moving. Okay, let's go ahead to the next topic. If it will let me click, it's not letting me click for some. Hold on, let me see if this is the issue.
Tech issues.
There we go. Wow, I don't know what was going on there. I think I changed this laser pointer. I thought it would be helpful and maybe not. All right, so the next topic is Class Bravo and Charlie airspace specifically. And so for the Class Bravo, we'll just kind of go with the order we've got here, which is the first one. And this has happened to me too. I've flown up around New York and I'll be like sometimes go through the Bravo and then they start vectoring you. And in the case of like New York, they vector you way out over the water, I guess out of the way of incoming traffic. And so the person was asking, you know, they want a direct course. We're flying VFR, and even if we're not inside the Bravo, but we want to get flight following and all this sort of stuff, what can we do about this vectoring thing where we get like taken way out of the way? I know Pablo's had this happen in Chicago. So what's any recommendations there?
Yeah, I'll take this one. First of all, in Class Bravo airspace, the controller is required to have specific amount of separation between VFRs and IFR airplanes. So the busier they are, the more likely they're going to keep you away from as many IFR airplanes as possible, which may be skirting the outside of their airspace. However, that whenever, just one thing to remember when you're VFR is if you get a vector and that vector is going to put you in a situation where you can't maintain VFR, the first thing you want to do is tell the controller, that's going to put me right in the middle of something. You know, I can see clouds over there. I don't think I can maintain VFR. So that is an important piece to this. But if you don't tell the controller that the vector is going to be a problem for you, they don't know that. And they will and are supposed to vector you to make sure that you remain clear of the IFR airplanes, at least minimum spacing, and they're likely to, the busier that they get and the busier the airspace is, VFRs are lower on the priority list, so to speak, as far as having a straight direct route, and they'll vector you to keep you away from the IFRs before they'll vector the IFRs to delay them to their destination. Does that answer your question?
Definitely explains why. So there's not necessarily any kind of secret thing other than just asking to get around that. It's just part of the operational things. I do know that there's probably going to be a follow-up in the audience maybe, because I've heard people say, well, if that's happening, do I just cancel flight following and then I can just stay out of the Bravo and do whatever I want? What kind of issue does that create then for the controller?
If you're out of this Class Bravo airspace, you can cancel your flight following anytime at all. Just stay out of the Class Bravo airspace. If you're in it, then there is an issue. They are going to make sure that you stay separated from their airplanes as long as you're in the Class Bravo. You can't be in there without a clearance. If they aren't vectoring you, then they're expecting you to use your own navigation, which of course, according to everything that pilots learn, is the controllers would expect you to go the most direct route possible. So if you don't get a vector, that's fine. You can go the most direct route possible. If you do get a vector, there's a reason. And the reason is to keep the airspace safe.
Perfect. And in fact, you've already hit two of the top things that are the getting vector part and the maintaining VFR. Obviously, clearly saying unable, I can't do that. How about this is another one hot off the presses that just this morning.
Real quick though.
Yeah.
We have one that's here, and someone asked something similar to this, I think, but and I already told them what I think the answer is. But if ATC vectors a 172 out over the water, happened to me in Milwaukee. Wasn't you, Rebecca? Was it? Okay. Beyond glide, 10 miles over Michigan for me. When should I say unable?
Okay, that's a great question. I love that question because it comes down to the very, very basic point that the pilot is responsible for the safe operation of his airplane, that air traffic controllers don't know everything, that this is a team effort. They specifically don't know everything about each individual type of aircraft. That's not going to happen. So if something's going to put you in an unsafe situation, you need to always speak up and never do that. You have the authority and you have the responsibility to keep your aircraft as safe as possible, your flight as safe as possible. And air traffic controllers know that. Nobody's going to say, when you say unable, they're not going to say unable back. They're going to figure out something for you, and they need to know from you that that's the situation.
Someone said that vectoring over water is illegal when you're out of glide distance. Is that true? Do you guys know? I don't want to put you on the spot with regulations all of a sudden.
There is a reg that says that we are not allowed to fly beyond gliding distances shore without flotation devices and things like that. So theoretically, if you got vectored out far enough, you could be in violation of that regulation because you don't have that stuff with you. So that's probably what they're getting at, my guess.
Yeah, it wouldn't be an air traffic control issue. Air traffic control has airspace. Certain airspace is theirs, and they deal with that airspace. And whatever the rules are within that airspace, they know it. They know what they are for them, but they won't know what is the rule for your airplane. And I would like to ask Damien if he has anything to add to that answer.
Yeah, only one thing I would add to that is tell air traffic sooner rather than later. The sooner you can tell air traffic, the better opportunity they have to make a plan to address your inability. And it's not that you're wrong or you're doing anything incorrect. It's okay, you can't do this for whatever reason, whether it's you can't maintain VFR or you're gonna bust a reg or whatever it may be. Tell air traffic early. They can make a plan, and then the plan it can be executed, and everybody can stay within the the realm of safety.
Cool.
Just
and then
one
Chris,
thing
quick question for you is flight following stuff. Do we have? I forgot if we have a slide for it because I've got several.
We do.
Flight following.
Oh yeah, it's coming up. Don't worry, it's coming up. We know there's. It's the next topic because it is the hot topic.
I can't find my coffee mug. I wish I had an AOPA ceramic coffee mug. Does anyone out there wish they had one? Okay, moving on.
I guess we'll see what you mean by that, Pablo. By the way, I would love for the fact to hear the exchange you mentioned, Rebecca, though, of the unable, you're unable. That would be a lot of fun to hear that exchange on the radio. So, all right. The last one here before we move on to the hottest topic of all actually has to do with flight following, and it's with Class Charlie. And so the person that wrote in asked, if I'm on with flight following and I'm approaching Class Charlie, and maybe we can hit on Bravo here too, just to hit them both. But I'm approaching Class Charlie, and I'm going to transition through the Charlie. Do I need to talk to Tower? Since I'm on with flight following, or how does that work? So what happens? Can one of you guys explain that?
Go ahead, Rebecca. It's you.
Yeah. Well, okay. So that can get pretty complicated. So I'm not going to talk at this moment about, say, flyways or transitions or corridors or special airspace. So we'll get to that probably at another time.
The next slide, I believe, actually. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to leave that out. So if you're getting flight following from, say, let's just make it, you're in SoCal Tracon's airspace, and you're going to cross over Montgomery's Class Delta, or you're going to cross over the Class Bravo airspace of San Diego Tower. And the approach controller has time, and he wants to, and it feels like a more efficient operation. They will do the coordination to make that happen without switching you to the tower. They will never. They should switch you to the tower if they don't have time to make the coordination. But in a controlled airspace like that, you're on a beacon code. The tower knows you're there already. They see you. When you call, it's not likely that the approach controller would not have already done some sort of coordination. So then the tower would want to speak to you for some reason. They may have something going on that they want to tell you about. that they didn't have time to tell the approach controller about. So I guess the bottom line is that if the approach controller does not switch you to the tower and you're not in any of those other airspaces that I just mentioned, then you're okay. The approach controller has done whatever coordination is necessary and is responsible for that. If, however, you have any doubt whatsoever, and I'll say this about anything and everything, always ask. Always ask. Do you want me to talk to the tower? It doesn't hurt anything. If you get a short answer saying, if I wanted you to talk to the tower, I would have told you to talk to the tower. Well, that's his problem. That's not your problem. Always ask, or her problem. Always ask if you're in doubt. But you would expect that if nobody is telling you to switch to the tower and you're on VFR flight following through a tower's airspace or through Class Bravo or through Class Charlie, the controller that has you has already taken care of whatever coordination is needed. So, but I'll ask Damien if he can think of any exceptions to that.
Yeah, the only potential caveat for that is if you're not in controlled airspace to begin with. So if you were getting flight following in Gulf airspace, and you were going to transition, whether it was a Bravo or a Charlie or a Delta airspace, prior to entering that airspace, because you are going from an uncontrolled to a controlled environment, you need to be talking to whoever owns that airspace, so that tower. Because again, you are in an uncontrolled airport, you are in an uncontrolled environment to begin with. So while you may be getting flight following, you are in uncontrolled airspace. So you need to ensure that either the approach controller has done the coordination, and if he has not, then I would see no issue in contacting the tower to advise.
And it sounds like to Rebecca's point, though, maybe the biggest thing there is to ask the controller this. Have you already spoken with this tower or whomever?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes.
And one other thing to confirm, if you're going to be going through Bravo, right, we still need to hear that cleared into Bravo before we enter it, even if we're on flight following.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. Correct. Always need to hear that. The other ones, not so much. As long as you're talking to them, you're good, and ask. Yeah. Perfect. Now, before we do go on to that, I know we are going to talk about those VFR flyways.
Let me make sure I'm clear, because I think Damien brought it up to where I'm not sure I was clear. If you're talking to a radar controller who is giving you flight following, you would expect that controller to coordinate if he will not allow you to go into somebody else's airspace without either you talking to them or him talking to them. Okay. So somebody is talking to the tower and coordinating permission to go into that airspace. And if you're in doubt, ask the controller. So there
cool.
You go.
That's really helpful. And then really quick before we move on, because I know we got to hit flight following. We got to come up with VFR flyways and all that. Is there any practical difference between approach, departure, center, all that stuff for a pilot? When we're speaking to them, we're getting switched over to tower, to approach, departure, or whatever. Practically speaking, is there really a difference for us? Do we need to worry about anything different between switching from one controller to another?
Frequency. That's okay. Pretty much it, right? There's different rules between approach, departure. Basically, that means Tracon. It's a terminal radar approach control facility, or TERSA. So there's different rules for separation that you don't have to care about. They have to care about between that and the center. And otherwise, no, the frequency. That's it.
Cool. So frequency, ATC takes care of the rest for us. Just make sure we pay attention and comply. Cool. All right. I know that we had some, I know we've got to get the flight following, I know, but I've forgotten that the VFR flyways, we've got a little bit on VFR flyways, so maybe we can hit these relatively quickly, but someone asked about that.
So. Yeah,
go ahead.
All right, I'll start. So, so on the San Francisco terminal map, this one's San Francisco, you might not know, but it shows VFR flyway that comes over the toll plaza of the Bay Bridge and then over the runway at KOAK. Oakland, I'm assuming. So the question is, just have ATC talk about VFR flyways and being directed over class Charlie with jets for general aviation. Wow, that's open-ended. So my guess would be probably, are you allowed to do it without talking to him would be one, because it's a VFR flyway, is what I'm getting from that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess,
Yeah, the VFR flyways are not in the Class Bravo airspace, right? And so, yeah, you don't have to talk to anybody as long as you're following all of your VFR rules. And that's my understanding. Now, you guys are CFIs. If I'm wrong, please tell me, because
that's correct. With the only caveat being like something like the DC CIFRA, where that's a whole separate thing. But yes, the flyways, you don't need to talk to anybody. That's why they're there, just to help you avoid the Bravo.
Yeah.
Which I think is fantastic that they have those published now, because you don't have to talk.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, like, they're pretty low, by the way, too. So you have to take that into account. Don't assume because it's a flyway, it's awesome. It's like this travel route. Now, you can do it. Like the one in Chicago, there's a mile difference between O'Hare and Midway. And it's at, I think it's 1,700 or 1,500 feet. And it just follows 290 straight into the city. It's like, that's hairy.
Yeah, I bet it is.
Low.
And traffic is concentrated in there.
Right. And the note here.
You'll be stuck in rush hour traffic if you do that. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, Rebecca.
Oh, I was just going to say the note on this slide is really important, because just because you're in the VFR flyway doesn't mean you can fly through other airspace. So if you're going to transition over the top of one of these smaller airports, and anything is taking you through that, any of your flight goes through that, you have got to call the tower and get permission to go through Class Delta airspace. So don't think this gives you any kind of a clearance into anything. It does not. So if you're going to go through airspace, you need to talk to somebody.
Yeah, it's more just guidance on how to avoid Bravo.
Exactly.
But not the other side. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, the rules, I guess we could say the rules don't change for Bravo just because it's something, right? Bravo's Bravo. You need permission to come in. Explicit. Yeah. That's it.
And then with that, just the little bit of, I guess people are looking for some explanation here on the VFR transition routes and VFR corridors, like in LA area, these are famous, and we used to have these in Phoenix too. So let's look for that question too. I know it was along the lines of basically actually, let's just talk operationally. With a VFR transition route, do you need clearance into Bravo for that one? Do you have to get a clearance for that?
Yeah, if you're going to go through the Bravo on the transition route, you absolutely must have a specific clearance into the Class Bravo airspace. And they'll put you on a code. I think the code is pretty standard, and you'll go through in that way. You cannot go into Class Bravo airspace, period, ever, anywhere, without a clearance.
There you go.
The VFR corridors there were only a couple, and I think they're being phased out and changed into special flight rules airspace, SFRAs. But LA had one that was major, and it was used all the time. And on a map, you would think it goes straight through the Class Bravo airspace, but because it's a VFR corridor, you did not have to talk to air traffic control and get a clearance through the Class Bravo airspace there. I think they had to talk to the Tracon, but they did not have to get a clearance. They could just go into, and they maintain their altitude according to their direction of flight, and they keep separated from each other on their own frequency. It's not something that's the controller is giving vectors in there or altitudes in there or anything. It's the VFR corridor.
There it is. And you'll notice these magenta arrows and everything else. Biggest thing, the difference is the transition is a path through the Bravo. You're going through it, you're getting cleared. The corridor is literally a hole in it. And so it's just like you were outside of the Bravo. So it's just a different thing. But like you said, the corridors are much more rare. Transitions you'll see. All right.
Well, transitions are important, Chris, and I have one here for flight following, but I can't do a transition without a travel mug that has a lid to keep the liquids in. And I happen to have one. So if someone wanted that, they'd have to ask nicely. So
quickly maybe too.
And no repeat winners, please. Okay. Actually, one of the things I was going to say, Rebecca, just to transition into our flight following stuff, is what you were saying is, because someone asked here as well, is if you're in flight following, does that mean you don't need to hear the magic words? No, you still need it. And that's your last statement. That's why it was perfect. You still need it. I don't care what you're doing. You still need it. And well, and I've done this many times. You guys that are repeat customers will know that almost, I would say 100% of the time, I'm a flight following going from Frederick to Chicago, and almost 100% of the time, I can't remember when they haven't, they clear me automatically into Bravo through my flight following. They will say you are cleared through Pittsburgh Bravo.
Yes, it helps.
Right. Now, I didn't ask, but those are the situations where you don't have to ask, but I still heard the magic words, I'm cleared through Bravo. Anyway.
Don't assume. It is time, Pablo. It is time for the most popular of all topics. We've got flight following, and so we're going to try to hit, there's so many questions on this. We will try to hit the gamut here. So the first one is, we'll just start with getting it. And the first part is, people are asking, how do you get it on the ground? Say that you're at an airport, whether it's a Delta or whatever, a Bravo, who do you call? And just to help clarify the question, they were asking, is that something you would call clearance delivery for? Do you ask ground? Do you ask tower? How do you get these, this thing? And then the sort of the caveat, or the thing that goes with that is, which frequency? How do you know which frequency to even call on to get flight following, maybe after departure? So Damien or Rebecca, help us out with that.
Sure, I'll start this one off. The first one is on the ground is to call clearance delivery. When you're in deltas, especially at smaller locations, smaller deltas, clearance delivery and ground control may be the same person. So it may be the same frequency. Now, there will be some locations that cannot do it on the ground because they don't have the equipment to actually put you into the system. So initially start with clearance delivery. The earlier you can request it when you're on the ground and you're not holding short of in a run-up area or something like that, the better you will be. If you're in the air, it's going to be, if you're talking to a Tracon controller, request it with the Tracon controller. They may have, depending upon their workload, be able to put it in at that time. You may have to wait a little bit. Again, it'll be workload permitting. So that's my recommendation for that is, if you're on the ground, start with clearance delivery, ground control, and then go from there. Also, get it before you, if possible, get it before you start taxiing out. Before you call for taxi, put their request in there. Because if you're going to wait till you're, if you're unable, that, again, if you're unable, then that's fine. Also, again, if the tower is unable, they will tell you, and then you can plan accordingly, because they will most likely be able to tell you, hey, unable to do it here at, Frederick or Easton or Montgomery or wherever it may be. Your request will need to be put in with whoever the IFR authority overhead, whether it's Potomac Tracon in the capital region, or if it's Los Angeles Tracon, in around the LA area. There's your SoCal Tracon in the LA area, that kind of thing. Rebecca, do you have anything to add?
That's a pretty thorough answer there. The only thing that I would add is that there are what is known as standard operating procedures and or letters of agreement at air traffic control facilities and between air traffic control facilities. So just because you get one answer at one airport, usually it's because of their equipment, what kind of equipment the tower actually has in their operations quarters. But often, or it can also be related to a standard operating procedure that they always will have the same answer to, and or a letter of agreement with the overlying facility of how something like that will be handled. So there are varied ways that it can be handled, but who to call and which frequency and the recommended communications is exactly, I think, what Damien said there.
Perfect. And I know that somebody had asked too, like how do you know which frequency? So I wanted to show this. If you can see that, there is our good friend, that little green book, although I have it on an iPad right now, the chart supplement, the old AFD. You'll look up your airport. That's how you find those various frequencies out. Or if you're using an electronic flight bag, you tap on the airport or whatever. So look there. And if your airport doesn't have that there, then you can look in the same part there and look for the part where it says communications, and it'll have the local approach departure control. That's how you find those frequencies for calling them. And then what I always find too is if that doesn't work, I'll get up and I'll call right away, and they're like, nope, use this frequency, and they just tell you what frequency they want. So, but you can ask. But check out in the books. All right. The next part is, and I'm not sure if we have a follow-up question or not, Pablo, but it's of course the recommended communications for how to get it. And so
Yeah,
this one has to do with, yeah, we got a couple like that. All right. So maybe I'll throw this one out there, and then we'll hit some of those ones we're getting. So this came up I know last time, but maybe we'll just reiterate it just to reinforce it this time really quick, which is, do you prefer, like, there's kind of two variations on this. One is, do you prefer the cold call, where it's literally like, I'm going to spit everything out at you all at once and see if you can get it, or do you prefer the one where we say, November 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 VFR request, and then we come back and tell you? And then the one little variation on that was, well, what if it's not busy? Like, I don't hear anything on frequency. Is it better for me to do the VFR request, or is it better for me to do the whole spit it all out? So, what do you guys think?
I'll lead with this one. And Rebecca, you can add if I miss something. Please tell me. Please, jump in. I hate to say this, but it depends, right? If it's a simple request, right? So in the Washington Capital area, if you're going from Frederick to Gaithersburg, right? Really short, but you want VFR flight following to there, and it's going to be a really short. There's not a lot of additional information. There's not a lot of special requests within it. You can most likely get away with a cold call. If it's going to be a more in-depth request with multiple stopovers, or hey, I want to go from here to here to here to here, then it's, hey, I have a VFR request, and then because what's going to happen is, if you give me all of that stuff all at one time, I don't know what's coming. So I most likely am going to be writing down on a piece of paper, actually a pad of paper, your request initially. And so if you give it to me all at once, I may grab a lot of it at one time, but I'm going to have to come back and ask you most likely the same information again. So you're going to end up saying the same information twice, maybe 3 times. Whereas if you say, hey, I have a VFR request, and I say, go ahead, go with your request, I now know, okay, you're going to be asking me for things. I'm ready to jot down the important information I need to put into the system.
So
Rebecca,
do you
have anything? Go ahead,
real quick, so the question there would be, in general, like you said, it depends. Is it better, at least in your opinion, to say, we'll use Chicago in this case, or Johnson? I always fight for them. I don't know where they exist, but Johnson Center, 528 Mike Juliet. That's what I hear a lot on the frequencies, right? It's like, I feel like that's not enough. Like, you're just bothering people just so they can come back and say, hey, 528 Mike Juliet, Johnson Center, what's your request? Like, for example, should I say Johnson Center flight following request, 528 Mike Juliet?
Yes. Yeah. To have your initial call be your call sign, Johnson Center, November 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, VFR flight following request. Again, at that point in time, I then know, okay, you're going to be asking flight following. I know what I need.
Cool.
So yeah, you can shorten it, but don't tell me, hey, VFR flight following request from here to here to here to here, stop over here and over there. And yeah, I'll tell you right now, I'm going to miss 75% of it.
Yeah, and to Pablo's point, it's always better to give a heads up as to what's coming next, right? So November 1, 2, 3, 4, nothing. The controller has no idea what's coming next. So it could, it could be with a request, with a altitude change, or with a route change, or destination change, or just a VFR flight following request. But give the controller an idea of what you want. And other than that, that's just reiterating what Damien said.
I mean, that's good, because the reiteration is good. Hey, Chris, do you want me to keep asking some of these flight followings, or you got more there?
Yeah, we got tons of them. So the next one, I was trying to just figure out, like, which one do we want to ask next?
Yeah, I know.
So, It's so many of them. Maybe let's move down the slide here too, because it's like that's when you're getting close to your destination airport. You're on with flight following, and so there's two things here that I thought were good ones. One is you're told, your airport's at 12 o'clock or whatever, and contact tower. Do you switch to VFR squawk code, or do you maintain the squawk code that you have? What's the best thing to do? Because I know sometimes I've been told squawk VFR, that's clear. But what if they don't tell you? What are we supposed to do?
Rebecca, would you like to take this one?
I knew that was coming. I actually ran this question by several Tracon controllers. The initial question that we were asked was, if the controller is too busy and doesn't switch you to the tower, should I just switch to the tower and squawk VFR? And so that's the question that I handed over to the Tracon controllers. And one of the Tracon controllers was my trainer at SoCal. And he started laughing. He said, "You know what I'm going to say?" And I said, "Yes, I do." He said, "The controller's never too busy." And so you cannot enter the tower's airspace without permission from the tower, period, at that point in time. So you're going to want to switch over to the tower for sure. And as far as whether or not you stay on the code or don't stay on the code, there's no rule about that, right? So it's interesting because if the tower happens to have STARS equipment, then your tag will come over to the tower on their radar display. So it's nice for them that you are still on the same code and they can see your call sign, they can see your type aircraft, they know a lot more about you than if you went and switched to a 1200 code. If the tower doesn't have radar, they don't even know that you switched to a 1200 code. So the Tracon controller really, most of them think, well, if he just switched to a 1200 code and he's approaching tower airspace, obviously he no longer needs me. He's going to call the tower, and he might check with the tower, make sure you checked in, might not, but they have a clear understanding that you just canceled your flight following. If you leave your code on, then they'll either reach out to you to make sure you switch to the tower, or they'll check with the tower and make sure you switch to the tower. But one way or another, they're going to still feel a little bit responsible for you on that code if you haven't already canceled your flight following. So I'm not sure if I'm getting it. Those are all the questions I know about flight following that were towards getting to the airport. And as far as an altitude restriction on your slide, I don't know what that question is about. So I'll let you guys continue.
So
let
I
me
got
just
one
clarify.
here. So based on that, maybe someone actually asked if there's a lower altitude limit for using Tracon, not flight following, but altitude based.
Is there a what? I'm sorry, say that again.
A lower altitude limit for using Tracon services.
Well, the Tracon only owns certain airspace, so yes, and those are published. What airspace they have. They could conceivably work somebody slightly outside of their airspace if they have good radar coverage, and they would do coordination if necessary. Does that answer?
Yeah.
So yes. And the one of the things was for the squawk code, just to reiterate, just to go back to that real quick. So basically, it sounds like you're not going to get in trouble if you stay on the squawk code and proceed into your landing, and then obviously switch it before you take off. So sounds like maybe just stay on it, especially if it could potentially help out the tower controller if they happen to have radar, which we wouldn't probably know. The altitude restriction question. Go ahead.
Unless air traffic tells you to squawk differently.
Right. Yeah, and I've had that happen. Squawk VFR. I know what that means. Hit the VFR button. Right. That's different.
Yeah, because a lot of times what that is Tracons only have so many codes that they have and they can use. And so if they're in a very busy location like SoCal Tracon, right, those numbers are premium, right? Those squawk codes are premium. So if they've got a really busy day because it's a beautiful flying day, they may need to release that code to use it somewhere else, to use it for somebody else who's requesting flight following.
Man, I didn't know that. So we should be offering like, hey, I'll give you $100 if you let me keep the code for right now. What's it worth to you? So right. the altitude one was when somebody had a situation where they were told on VFR flight following, maintain at or above 6,000. And then they canceled, that's what ATC had told them. So they're on that restriction. And then they canceled their flight following is it okay at that point to ignore that altitude restriction? That was the altitude one. So if at that point they're approaching, they're told maintain 6,000, and so they're like, okay, well, I'm going to cancel my flight following. Do they still have to hold that altitude restriction then?
Rebecca?
So I can think of all kinds of reasons why that would be a problem for the controller. However, I think, and maybe I should take this question and double check it, but I think if you cancel the flight following and you aren't giving, something doesn't happen, some sort of communication at that point doesn't happen between you and the controller about staying at an altitude, or telling you why you were at that altitude, issuing you some traffic, whatever. If some sort of communication doesn't happen right there, right then yes, the altitude restriction is null and void. If you're just allowed to cancel your flight following and nobody says anything to you about doing something special, then I think that you're clear, you're done, you're on your own. So, but I would also not just like to hear from Damien if but you guys as pilots, is that your experience?
So as pilots, well, I know that the reason this person's had it, and it doesn't happen often, but their concern was that it's like they're approaching their destination, they're being told to maintain 6, not being released until they're really close, and now they're diving to get down, and that's why they wanted to cancel. Like, I need to get down, and maybe you ask and say, no, you need to maintain 6. Well, like, I need to get down, so they just cancel it and say, I'm going to do what I want, and I'll take my own separation, basically.
Well, obviously, if you're in the Class Bravo airspace, that you can't do that, right? I mean, you're in the Class Bravo airspace, you were assigned an altitude for a reason. There's some airplanes in there, and they're not going to let you do that. That's what I mean. And I was trying to not pin it down to airspace, but just say, if the controller doesn't come back to you right then with some reason why this is not going to work, you need to do this, then yeah, if he lets you just switch and he lets you just cancel your flight following, then in his mind, that's a safe thing to do.
Okay.
So yeah, so does that?
Yep, that answers it.
Same page?
And I think obviously in Bravo it's different. I think they're talking outside of Bravo.
Yeah.
So
the only addition I would add to that is, well, okay, yes, Bravo and Charlie are different entities altogether. Delta also has a little bit of a little hook into it, because that at or above, well, it's not going to be 6,000, because Deltas are not going to go up to 6,000 feet above ground level in most cases, but it could remain at or above 2,000 feet, right? And it will put you right over top of a delta. Well, you're inside the delta, and so while you're canceling flight following, you're still inside of.
Damien, you're frozen up there a little bit.
I think what he's getting at is you're still inside the delta.
Space. So before you would descend, make sure that you.
Yeah, I think we lost him.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's ask a couple more.
Okay.
So someone asked, if you're on flight following, can you be vectored?
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I mean, it's kind of.
But it's not a silly question, because again, you are in charge of the airplane and the safety for the airplane, and you're responsible for that. So if the vector is going to put you in some sort of situation that you're not comfortable with, that's your responsibility to tell the controller, and they'll work around it. They'll figure it out.
Cool.
Can you cancel flight following any airspace? Not Bravo. We already talked about that. But Charlie, Delta.
So
I mean, they're pretty low anyway. I mean, Delta is like 2,000 here.
You're usually not getting flight following in Delta unless you're talking to the surrounding airspace. So maybe there's a Class Bravo controller that coordinated for you through the Delta airspace, and then no, he's gonna make you talk to the tower, right? He's gonna do whatever the tower told him to do. If the tower told the Tracon controller, yes, they can go through my airspace, but keep them at or above 2,000, like Damien was saying. And so I told the airplane that, and then he tells me in the middle of the tower's airspace that he wants to cancel flight following. I'm not going to allow that to happen without coordinating with the tower, or, you know, and telling the tower he's coming to you because he doesn't want flight following anymore. He doesn't want to be restricted or whatever. But yeah, so there's a lot of coordination that goes on between controllers behind the scenes. But yeah, if you're talking to the surrounding controller and they gave you some sort of a altitude restriction, they don't own that airspace. They coordinated that airspace. Therefore, they're not going to release it until they can coordinate and get that released. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Totally.
totally.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
the last one on here as well, and I'm hoping, Damien, are you on by audio? I just want to check real quick. Okay, well, I'm sure he's working and he's getting himself back on. But the flight plan route info, and so this one, there was one question we had that came up and said, what's the difference between a VFR flight plan and flight following? I'll go ahead and answer that one really quickly. The VFR flight plan is the thing we fill out for search and rescue that you do through flight service or online, whereas VFR flight following is the services you receive for traffic avoidance. So I just wanted to knock that one out. If I'm incorrect there, please correct me. But the really good one here that I've had happen, and generally I've just used the old adage of I just ask, but people have said they put in for flight following, but their route isn't necessarily a direct line. And oftentimes ATC expects we're just flying a straight line to wherever we're going, but we want to take a more, you know, maybe a more scenic route, or we've got some waypoints that we want to hit or that we have planned on. Is there a way for us to effectively get that across to the controller? Because sometimes you get switched sectors and it seems like the person in the next sector has no idea that you already told them, I'm not taking a direct route, I'm doing this way. So is there a way for us to, how do we go about helping the controller understand that we're not going necessarily direct?
Are you on a flight plan or are you flight following?
So not IFR, but VFR and flight following, yes.
Flight following. Okay, so you have a flight plan filed?
So let's say that we do. Let's say that we filed
Okay.
like
If you have a flight plan filed, you just say, you know, so-and-so that you're checking in and I'd like to fly my flight plan. The second the controller says to you, I'd like to go direct, then you can come back with, I'd like to fly the flight plan, if that's okay.
So you guys have access to the VFR flight plans that we file?
Nope. So we're going to
Okay.
find out what that is, right? So if we need to, we have access to it. Let me rephrase that. But
Okay.
nobody's going to go look for it for you. So yeah, we could get it. We're not going to. So then you need to either, I think Damien mentioned when we were talking about this, you can, you know, the heading I'm requesting is a 310, or I'd like to go northwestbound, or I'd like to, you know, I've got a couple things I need to look at. Do you mind if I fly this heading? I mean, you guys can just talk to us. It's okay, right? you know, you don't have to be official, and you can just say, I'd prefer not to go direct today. I had some things I needed to look at. A 310 heading would work for me. Would that work for you? You know, so you just keep communicating. That's the main thing. This is what I'd like to do. Does that work for you? And that's. Damien, did you get a chance to hear what we're asking? What they're asking is if you're on a flight plan or VFR flight following, and you don't want to go direct to whatever your destination is, how do you communicate that?
My request would, or my recommendation would be, kind of give it to us in increments, right? So if you want to go to the, you know, a vineyard that's to the northwest, and then over to, you know, something else, right? A reservoir or a lake. Tell us, hey, yeah, I'd like to, you know, VFR up to, you know, such and such vineyard, and then over to the reservoir. At that point in time, the controller then knows, okay, yeah, you're not going to go direct. Yep, you're going to go to the northwest, and then maybe you'll go to the west a little bit before you go. That would be my recommendation.
Okay, and so the increments part, because obviously us loading out the entire flight plan of all these waypoints is a little too much. Right, so just do it as we go.
Well, and not only that, it's the controller that you're talking to may not be responsible for all those locations. That may be outside of his or her sector that they're responsible for. So if you say, okay, hey, I want to go to here, and it's 50 miles, you may go into a different sector at that point in time. And he's like, well, I'm happy for you. You want to go, you know, 50 miles north of me. I can't help you another sector away from me. I won't have control over you at that point in time.
So would it almost be like
Wait,
maybe
hold on,
breaking it?
Chris. Just to make a quick announcement here, it is 12 o'clock. We've hit the official end, but not the actual end. So we will stick around to finish up. We will stick around for about 30 minutes after these to get to our answers or even more questions we have, because they're coming in fast and furious. But we can't send people away in those cold weather temperatures like here without perhaps a stocking cap to keep us warm. So the first one that wants one would get one if they were so inclined to ask.
Would that be like a toque? Would that be like a toque you're talking about?
A beanie, yes. Yeah, but then, to attend other things to show off your pride, we might even give away a baseball cap to the first person that asks for a baseball cap. I don't know, call me crazy. Call me crazy, but things are flying off the shelves. Okay, let's continue.
And really quick, just for that official end.
Tell me which one you want, because there's only one of each. So if you say I'd like one,
That's no good. That's no good. You got to be specific. Be clear with your communications. I believe that's a theme we've been having here.
It is.
By the way, really quick before we get back to we'll continue the Q&A here. If you want to get the code for the AOPA app and the pilot passport, there is your code. It's YCF, as in you can fly webinar 120921. That's the date, December 9th, 2021. So there is your code. And just a little quick preview for next month. We'll be back in January. And the topic, believe it or not, we're going to talk about some winter type flying stuff. And the title, Pablo, ice, maybe.
Ice. I almost said baby, maybe. We don't want the trademark infringements. And it does have a different tone. Dun, dun, dun.
Totally different groove, totally different bass groove. I'll be working on that. that one. Okay, let's get back to the topic. There's your code, by the way, again, YCF Web 120921. So let's go back. We were talking about flight following. Do we have more questions on flight following before we hit up IFR operations?
I've got tons.
Well, maybe pick another one or two. So many questions about flight following. It's crazy.
I mean, seriously, it'd be too hard. You'd have to sit here and watch me pick the right one. Let's just move on. We could follow up with these later.
Okay. Last time we were a little remiss because we were rushing at the end because of so many questions, which we love. We love your questions, but it was for IFR operations. So we want to give a little love to our folks out there that are either training for IFR or flying IFR. And so the first one was, it kind of goes along with that idea of the sort of the VFR flight following, but what's the best way to get an IFR clearance? And specifically what this person was asking about was, well, one person had a suggestion. They said, we know that ATC gets an email or some kind of computer readout, right, of the IFR clearance. Is there any way that you could just email that to us so we don't have to copy it? And so I don't know if that's even something that's possible, but I wanted to throw that out there to you. And then the other more broad tip would be, what are your recommendations for how to best get an IFR clearance? Like, what's the best way to go about doing that to make it easier?
Okay, so I'll take that one. First, no, we cannot email it out. That's not an option. Eventually, maybe down the road,
Is it just because the tech's not there or not allowed, or what's the?
Both, right? We do not. The FAA does not email out flight plans. There is technology for larger airplanes that is coming, and some actually even have it where their system, it can automatically just be generated into their system and sent through their system. But the FAA will not send an email out with your flight plan. That's not going to happen, at least not anytime soon. The best way to get it clear,
maybe in the future.
Maybe in the future, potentially, yes.
Okay.
The FAA is always working on new technology and new methods to get clearances out. Best way to get IFR clearance, if you're on the ground, again, as we said with flight following, get it early. You're going to be calling FSS, you're going to be filing it, that type of thing. If you want to call clearance delivery, if the facility has the ability to put it in and they have the time, again, it will depend on what facility you're at, right? I would not recommend calling a Class Bravo clearance delivery and asking for an IFR flight plan to be typed in the system by the clearance delivery individual. They've got a lot going on. You might get it,
but it's going to take you probably going to take you a long time for them to type that into the FDIO system. That if you're in a bigger airport like that, FSS, follow your standard IFR clearance method. If you're in the air and you need an IFR clearance, again, it's going to take you a little bit. You ask the Tracon controller, but again, get it early. Don't wait to the last minute, because it's not going to be something that is going to be quick.
So, and when you said FSFs, you're talking about, just in case people don't know the acronym or the initials, you said to file it with
Flight Service Station.
Yes, there we go. Flight Service Station. Thanks.
Yeah.
So that's 1-800-WX brief.
And then go ahead, Rebecca. Please add.
I was just going to add, if it's an uncontrolled airport, your best bet is the telephone. One of the reasons for the IFR clearances or if it's a closed airport that is normally controlled, same thing, the telephone. There's very, very specific legal language that controllers have to use when they're giving clearances over the phone. And that's part of the reason, I'm sure, why it's not coming through email to people who aren't as trained as your commercial pilots that have the equipment, is specifically so that no one misunderstands that the clearance does not mean that you're released. So these, there's a big difference between getting your clearance and actually being released off of the airport and into the IFR system. So that's important to remember. And so I think that the only other thing, local airports. So if you're in the Class Bravo airspace, for example, and you're departing from Limburg to Montgomery or Montgomery to Gillespie or Gillespie to Brown, they can put an IFR plan into the system with a stroke of their fingers on a keyboard. And it's just your call sign and your type airplane and where you're going. And the reason for that is that the clearance that you receive, that they then tell you, is known by everybody in that facility. So they have their standard operating procedure. They know if you're IFR from this airport to that airport, you will fly this route. And they can immediately give you a beacon code. They can immediately give you your altitude, and they'll probably just give you radar vectors and off you go. So if it's within their airspace, it's not a big deal to put it into the flight service station and the host computers and get it all the way through the whole system. It just needs to be within the system of that area. So in Southern California, SoCal Tracon covers all the way from Van Nuys Burbank area all the way down to the Mexican border and all the way over to Palm Springs. So if you're going from airport to airport within that airspace, you don't need to file with flight service. You can just get it from clearance delivery. They'll give you a code and off you go. So.
And if you're wondering, other than SoCal, because I've actually done that over there, I used to live in Arizona and we used to go over there for that purpose, but check your little green book if you still have it on paper, or the PDF, because in the chart supplement, you've got your tower and route control, and it shows you where those things are, and that's exactly what I think Rebecca's talking about. And so there are some of those around. We get these airports that are tied together. Let's talk about practice approaches here. And this is the person's asking, and this is one that I'm an instrument instructor as well. And so it's a challenge that I've often faced. What's the best way when it's busy and we're out there trying to work with a student to get practice approaches? Is there any tips are there any tips you can give for helping us get practice IFR approaches to various airports?
So I'll take this one. The first recommendation I would give is, if there is an airport that is farther away from a big airport, right? So in the area of like Baltimore, right? So you have Frederick, you have Gaithersburg, you have Martin State. Well, Martin State's really close. Martin State is close, right? So if you can go to someplace else to do it other than Martin State, you probably have a better shot of getting more in line with it. Many people will leave the Martin State or Frederick area, and they would actually come down to Easton, Maryland, and do the IFR practice because they're away from the Bravo. They're still under the Potomac Tracon airspace, but at that point in time, they're not interacting with the departures and arrivals in and out of Baltimore. They're not fighting with the Class Bravo airspace. They're outside of that Bravo. So that would be my recommendation. Second is do them in increments. Don't say, hey, I want to do 10 IFR practice approaches because that's going to be a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. You know, it kind of identify what's the minimum you need to do. You know, give yourself a little buffer because, you know, naturally things happen and you may need to do something because something doesn't go right. You know, or you say, you know what, that really wasn't a great approach. I really would like to do another one. Okay, but if you can get away with 6, don't ask for 12.
I would want to see the person's brain after doing 12 approaches. My gosh, usually after about 3 or 4, it's already melted. So,
but that's what it is. Rebecca, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, I think that was a really, well, yeah, just a little bit of clarification for an example. Montgomery Field in San Diego area is very close to Lindbergh Airport. And the final to their runways goes underneath the Lindbergh final. So that for the controller of that airspace can become too much to handle, right? He's got to protect his primary airport and he's got to handle a rush of arrivals to the primary airport. You're better off going to someplace in that example like Carlsbad, which is way away from Lindbergh and nowhere near Miramar, not sitting in between the 2 major airports of a Class Bravo that both have Class Bravo on the airport. You're not in between those 2. So you're much more likely to get every practice approach that you want if you go to the airport that's further away from the primary Class Bravo airport.
cool. And that makes great sense. And it obviously is common sense. Get away from the busy airspace. You'll probably get more to do, which is what I often did with doing touch and goes anyway. I'd go to some airport that was farther away where they weren't busy, like Martinsburg here in the Frederick area. I love to go over there because they're not busy.
Hey, quick question for you guys though too, based on that, because this happened to me and someone asked it and I said yes. So let's say hypothetically you're flight following, it's 3 hours into the trip and you're somewhere, I don't know, hypothetically western West Virginia, and all of a sudden it's silent and you're like, what happened? And there's nobody on the call. You just literally have lost your communication. So you call into the local one, which is hypothetically Johnson Center, and they're like, oh, we were trying to get a hold of you. What happens in that situation? I mean, you don't send search and rescue, of course, right? But what happens if you lose a flight following? Do you contact another tower and say, hey, can you call, or not another tower, but another control center or somebody to say, hey, anybody heard from hypothetically 8 Mike Juliet?
Rebecca, you want to take that one?
Very specific.
So if you have a VFR clearance on file, that's the reason for it, is for search and rescue. So we know where to look, right? So we do have
I don't have a flight plan. I don't have a
Oh,
flight
okay.
plan.
So you're just flight following.
Just flight following, yep.
And you've lost your radio. You haven't
I haven't
like
lost the
dived-
radio. At some point, it just, you know, either
Can't talk to that center anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know actually, and this is obviously me, if you didn't know. But at some point, maybe I didn't hear the switch over to or contact or blah, 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 but something happened where it was literally like, it's been, you know, you sit there and go, it's been like an hour since I've talked to anybody, what, you know? And literally, maybe I just didn't hear the switch over, but it just dropped. And I was so close to Frederick, I actually did not pick up again the flight following. So where people running around with their heads cut off going, oh my God, what happened to 8 Mike Juliet? What happened? Or what happened?
No, because your frequency was not receiving or transmitting anything doesn't mean that they weren't able to watch your airplane.
Okay.
Right. So
Yep.
if they had radar contact with you, they were watching your airplane. If they lost radar contact with you, we used to lose an airplane over Julian almost every year. And that was icing, and they often did crash into the mountain, and they would disappear, and they would start going, you know, you could see the target starting to go down, and you would reach out and you would ask airplanes that were in the area to reach out and ask if anybody heard him or her, if they could relay messages back and forth. You would broadcast in the blind with minimum vectoring altitudes, and the safest way, if you have to descend, the safest direction to be flying, and things like that when you thought the need was there. However, if you appeared to be just trucking along, no big change in altitude, no big change in direction of flight, nothing appeared to be abnormal. They'll just watch. And if they need to coordinate, they will coordinate.
Gotcha.
And if they need to try to reach you, they will try. And don't forget, they can try on 21.5, and they'll try through other airplanes, and they'll try through other facilities. So it's a judgment call.
Cool. Okay. I got one more, Chris. If I can have the floor, please.
Yep.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Oh, by the way, Pablo, real quick tip on that. By the way, if you had that situation, look in your little green book, look in the EFB and see what the next frequency is. Look for where you're around, and maybe try calling them. Sorry. Go ahead.
I did. I actually ended up calling Potomac, and they were like, "Nope, you're still too far out." I'm like, "All right, forget it." I did. I'm like,
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for nothing. Anyway, okay. So this is one flight following, if we may. If you're on flight following and you're told, I forgot how it goes. Someone asked this, an altitude restriction, let's call it, to maintain 7,500 or something, and then you go to 9,500 because there's some clouds or something. You just want to be free of it for 10 minutes. Do you have to say, "Hey, Johnson, climbing 9.5, blah blah blah," or can you just climb it? Are those things, can you change those without asking?
If you were assigned an altitude, don't change it without asking, ever. But if you were assigned at or above 7,500, or if you were assigned a block between 75 and 11.5, which would be weird, but if you were, then you don't have to say a word. You can just maneuver within that. It's nice to, let me just put it another way though. The more everybody knows about what's going on, the better the system runs. So I would still say, I'm leaving 75 for 95. I would say it, regardless.
Now that makes sense, but I got yelled at for that. So on the same trip, back-to-back centers, the first one says, "Tell us." I climbed. "Hey, 8 Mike Juliet, next time tell us." Okay. An hour later, I descended. "Hey, what are you telling us that you descended for?"
Unfortunately, because there's no standard, that it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Okay.
All right. And with that, on the same thing, if you're going to climb or you're going to descend, a good idea would be to, if it's based off of weather, tell us that. If you're saying, "Hey, I'm descending or I'm climbing because I'm having difficulty maintaining VFR."
Okay, I gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
There you go.
Okay, cool.
Last one for IFR. This is a good one. I'm just going to skip this one, the visual approach. I thought this was a really good one. You've been cleared for the visual approach. For my VFR pilots out there, that's an instrument approach where we're not necessarily following navigation aids, but we can see the airport, but we're still on an instrument flight plan. You've been told you're clear for the visual approach. Does ATC expect you to come in on the 45 on the downwind, or can we just come straight into the runway? So they want to know, do we have to fly a pattern, or can we just go ahead and sort of set ourselves up for final? What's the expectation there?
Okay, so if you're on a visual approach to a controlled airport like Frederick,
yes,
right,
controlled airport,
right, then the tower will give you a entrance instruction, whether it's enter downwind, enter a base, make a straight in approach. They will, and whatever that instruction is, then the expectation is that you're going to follow it. If you can't, say enable. But it is not that you're just going to fly into wherever, whatever is potentially even the closest to you. The base might be the closest to get you to the airport, might be the shortest distance to fly. But if I've got aircraft in the pattern, I probably am not going to put you on the base. I may have you fly and enter the downwind on the 45. Or go the other direction and have you maneuver to intercept a 4-mile final or a 3-mile final and make a straight in approach. Those types of things. It's going to be based off of the traffic that the controller has at the time.
So it sounds like if we don't get those instructions, we need to be asking for it then, because there is an expectation of some sort of plan.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, very seldom would I expect a controller to have a visual approach come in and not give them some type of entrance instruction.
Cool. So Pablo, that means no potpourri clearances there on that one. Clear for the visual potpourri.
That's
Yeah,
right.
so the controller is required to provide sequencing and spacing services, right? So that's what they're going to do, and they're going to do that through the instructions that Damien described to make sure that their sequence and their spacing, it'll depend on your type aircraft, where you're coming from, and how busy they are. The other thing I wanted to mention, though, is in an uncontrolled airport, you know, you guys are going to do whatever you're going to do. The Tracon's going to turn you over to communications for the facility. I'm sorry, not for the facility, but for the airport as soon as possible, so that you and the other airplanes can figure out what the sequence is, right? So there's a little difference there.
And in that case, we would obviously do whatever would be safe. In the case of a visual, though, then we probably would fly the platter to better fit in with any VFR traffic that might be there.
Yeah, the
Chris,
Tracon controller would expect you to. Sorry, Pablo, I cut you out.
No, I was just making fun. So continue.
Oh, I was just going to say,
Yeah,
I think the Tracon controller expects you to go the most direct route. However, they understand that.
There we go.
They understand that you have to fit in with the other airplanes and that you'll be maneuvering. So
there it is. Perfect. All right,
Cool.
Pablo, I know let me just show you the last slide that we've got. It's on radio comms. I can just pick one unless you've got some really pressing ones that we want to get to. The only one that I wanted to mention, maybe go for it then. I was just going to ask one about the.
No. These were we asked for preset ones, so ask these.
Okay. All right. So we've already covered the best way to make initial calls, which is obviously if they're busy to do the whole VFR request. If you can be a little more specific, like flight following request, that's a great tip. I've never heard that one and I love it. This one I thought was interesting because I often will teach my students, rather than saying November 528 Mike Juliet, is it better for us to say, and I will often teach this, say Skylane 528 Mike Juliet, because that way I'm letting the controller know that this is a 182. Is that helpful, or is it not helpful necessarily for us to do that, to use the airplane model instead of just November, or do you prefer November instead?
I'll lead with this one. To be honest with you, it doesn't matter either way. There's no set way. The only caveat is if you are going to give the initial call at November, include your type airplane in the initial call, because if you don't, I'm going to call back and ask you anyway.
Okay.
So in the interest of reducing length of communication, the airplane model and then the tail number, right? So Skylane 225 Mike Delta, perfectly fine. I love it, because then I automatically know the type of airplane you are and your call sign. So also for this, what I would also recommend is when you call in, give us your full numbers, right? So don't abbreviate it. And so what I mean by that is, if you're going to call it, say Skylane, and it's 225 Mike Delta, unfortunately, I've heard in many instances, Skylane 5 Mike Delta, blah, blah, blah tower. Well, that's all I know then. And so that's the only thing that I have. So if I get another airplane inbound that has 5 Mike Delta as part of the tail number, but maybe the first two numbers are different, then it's going to potentially lead to confusion. So make sure you give your full tail number and then the airplane model, or the airplane model and then the full tail number.
Cool, good tip.
Rebecca, anything?
Thank you.
Nope.
Looks like she's good.
Yeah.
All right, so this is one we had last time as well. So we just hit it again, just real briefly, but it's the typical thing where we get on with somebody and they're ATC, especially when you get to the busy ones, they can start going kind of quick. And the person was asking, what's the polite way and proper way to say, can you please slow down? I can't follow it that fast. Is there anything that you would like to hear from us that won't make you mad?
Oof.
So
go ahead, Rebecca.
Well, I have a story about that one. So that one makes me laugh, because I worked at O'Hare and in the tower, And we talk really fast at O'Hare pretty much and nonstop. So we don't let you acknowledge either. We just go. And I was talking there, I was giving directions to about 6 airplanes in a row when a professional Delta pilot came on after the 6 and said, "Ma'am, do you notice how fast I'm talking? That's about how fast I can write. Could you please say that again?" So that's a very polite way to say slow down. Another way is to say student pilot. You can always say that, and most controllers will just automatically slow down for you. However, just saying, if you've been listening on the frequency and you can tell that the controller is just talking faster than it works for you, don't hesitate to say it on initial call. I'd appreciate it if you can speak a little slower when you're talking to me. I don't understand. Just speak English. It's okay. It's okay to speak English. And I realize that there are controllers out there that will give you a hard time and yell at you and say, "I don't need you on my frequency," and they are embarrassing to me. And I know they're embarrassing to Damien. If you guys need help, you just ask. And
Yeah,
the professional controller will be professional in response.
And
Yeah,
I got to tell you, if we have any professional, commercial pilots out there like Delta, the big guys, next time we fly into O'Hare, I would love it if you were to say student pilot. Thank you. That's my request. You're like, what? That'd be awesome. Come on, that'd be awesome, right, Rebecca? Come on.
Oh, that would be fantastic. They would love that.
2170 student pilot.
That would be great.
That's right.
Beautiful. And in fact, right along those lines, though, we had a question. The last one I had on here was the student pilot call sign. So somebody was asking, like, okay, I'm not a student pilot, I'm a certificated pilot. Is it okay to say that? Because we're always learning anyway. Do you guys have any problem with somebody saying, "I'm having a hard time, I'm going to use the student pilot call sign"? Is that okay?
I'll take that one. No, it's not. There's no problem with it at all. The only caveat is, I would tell you, is if you tell me you're a student pilot, then I will not, in many instances, be as open to you doing out of the ordinary things, because I'm going to expect your proficiency level to be lower. So if I've got a tight hole that I need to put you in, and you tell me you're a student pilot, I'm probably not going to put you in that hole. So you may end up having to fly a little bit longer to get into a bigger hole, because again, I can't. You tell me student pilot, I don't know what your level of proficiency and capability is. So no, you can tell me you're a student pilot, perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with that at all. But just be advised.
You're going to expect a student pilot in that case.
That's right. There are restrictions with that request.
Yeah, there are caveats to that.
That's right. Well, listen,
that's fair.
Chris, I don't know
how
much you want to take it, but we're 12:28, so we have to start saying our goodbyes soon. I don't know if we got another one. Yeah. Okay.
So many questions. So many questions.
And as someone said on the chat here, it sounds like a part 3 is coming. Oh my goodness. So let me start by saying thank you to Damien and Rebecca. This was fantastic. And for those answers or the questions we could not get answers to, listen, there's just too many. So, and by the way, all the prizes are gone, so stop asking me. And this is our last one of 2021. This is the last one, so it's December. So we'll start up again in January. Can you put up that slide for the next one, Chris?
Oh, sure. Let's see.
So if nothing else, happy holidays. I won't get specific into each holiday because there are many. So happy holidays to those that are celebrating whatever it is. And
I'm not sure if my camera's below or above the screen, but look at the date too. You might want to mention that.
Oh my goodness, yes. The next episode will be January 27th. A
little different than the normal schedule.
That's right. We're going a little later now. We were going early in the months here in 21. We're going to go a little later next year because we've got some really good things planned with more prizes, as I've told people in the chat. So hey, stick around, come back, bring a friend. And also John T. I won't say last names. I got chastised for that last time. John T, Joe B, Kurt A, Paul G, and Charles. I forgot your last name. Congratulations on winning one of the 5 pre-mentioned prizes, whether it be one of the 2 travel mugs, ceramic, coffee mug, baseball hat, or stocking cap. You've all won those, so congratulations to you. Expect those soon. Steven should have reached out to you by then. Steven, are you on? Is that correct?
That is correct. I will get in touch with everyone and get things shipped out as soon as possible.
Excellent. So thank you so much. And again, thank you to our guests, Rebecca, Damien, Chris. Thank you. You want to play us out?
I don't have my thing, but you know what I do want to say? One last comment. Pablo, with the suit that you are wearing, we are all winners today. So even if you didn't get a prize, we're all winners with being able to watch that the whole time.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's noticed, but you know, I like to keep these things fresh. So on that note, thank you, Chris. We'll talk to everybody later. Steven?
Out we go.
Who's that to take us?
All
All right.
Take us away.